Coming up, pound and shilling Nova Scotia banknotes, Nazis near Nova Scotian waters, sunken Volvos, and more. Hi, my name is Chris Melnick, and I'm a realtor in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, I have delved deeper and managed to come up with 10 more obscure facts that you probably didn't know about Nova Scotia, which again has nothing to do with real estate, but it's much more interesting than hearing me talk about property tax. Number 1, the Bank of Nova Scotia once printed its own money, and at one point in time, it was in pounds and shillings. So it was possible to get a 7-pound, 10-shilling Nova Scotia bill. Now, you may be thinking, well, prior to Confederation, it was probably the wild, wild west of money, and then it became more organized with Confederation. But you'd be wrong. The Bank of Nova Scotia was actually printing its own bills until 1935, which is when our central bank, the Bank of Canada, was created, who then began issuing all the bills in the country. They did switch from pounds and shillings to dollars in 1864 to become more in line with the US, though. Number 2, a Nova Scotian discovered kerosene and some of its derivatives. Now, this in itself may not seem too interesting, because when you think of kerosene, you probably think of old-fashioned lanterns, which is what it was originally developed for. But you may not know that kerosene-derived fuel is what powers jet airplanes and gasoline-powered cars. So that is absolutely monumental. All of this is in part thanks to a Nova Scotian. Abraham Gesner was born in Cornwallis, Nova Scotia in 1797. He became a geologist and a physician and experimented with hydrocarbons in the 1840s and gave the first demonstration of his new lamp fuel, kerosene, in 1846. He later moved to New York City, helped to create the North American Kerosene Company, and received patents for certain derivatives of kerosene, including gasoline in 1854. Unfortunately, even though he had made the discoveries years before, someone else filed the U.S. patents 2 years before him. So the North American Kerosene Company had to pay royalties to this other inventor instead. Eventually, the North American Kerosene Company was bought by a subsidiary of Standard Oil. Number 3, a German U-boat sank a ferry going from Sydney, Nova Scotia to Port aux Basques, Newfoundland. This may come as a surprise because many people may think that the Germans were never this close to Canada, but they were in the waters around Atlantic Canada. In 1942, a ferry called the SS Caribou left Sydney, Nova Scotia, and was sunk 37 kilometers from Port aux Basques. This is often called the most significant sinking in Canadian-controlled waters in World War II. Number 4, in Nova Scotia, it's possible for normal people like me and you to actually own land under the ocean. Now, in most places, you can only own up to the high water mark, and not the beach or anything beyond that. But in Nova Scotia, prior to Confederation, you could own below the high water mark and beyond. After Confederation, they modernized the rules like today, but these old ocean lots were grandfathered in. We call them pre-Confederation lots, or water lots today, and they're seen as very exclusive. You can't yell at kayakers for trespassing over that part of the ocean, but it does make it very easy to build wharfs or infill. Number 5, the oldest chartered university in Canada is in Nova Scotia. King's College was established in Windsor, Nova Scotia in 1789 and is the oldest English-speaking university in the Commonwealth outside the UK. It was named after King George III. In 1920, after a fire, it moved to Halifax. It's been called the Harvard of the North and compared to Harry Potter because they periodically have formal dinners together in a big hall where they say Latin grace and wear academic gowns. Number 6, there's a pub in Nova Scotia that predates the formation of the United States of America by 12 years. The Foxhill Pub in Chester was established in 1764 and is the oldest in Nova Scotia. At various points in its history, it was a grocery store, a stable, and an inn. Some people call it Chester's living room, which would seem appropriate as Foxhill is the shortened version of forecastle, which means the forward part of a ship below the deck, traditionally used as the crew's living quarters. Number 7, There are sunken Volvos in the Bedford Basin. Now that sounds weird, but it gets even weirder. In 1963, a Swedish prince opened the Volvo factory in Dartmouth, which was the first ever outside of Sweden. And this was to avoid import taxes at the time. Shortly thereafter, it was relocated to Halifax. Then, in 1969, a container of Volvos came across the Atlantic, but somehow got seawater in them. When they made it to Halifax, they were too badly damaged and couldn't be used. So they received permission from the Department of Environment to dump them in the Bedford Basin if they removed the fluids and decontaminated them. And that's where 32 cars still lay today. Ships in the basin are aware of this, so they don't hook their anchors onto them. The Volvo factory later closed in 1998. Number 8, the second largest grocery chain in Canada was started in Nova Scotia. In 1907, Sobeys was established in Stellarton, Nova Scotia. It currently has over 1,500 stores across Canada and owns Safeway too. Interestingly enough, its headquarters is still in Stellarton, which has a population of 4,208 in 2016. To put that into perspective, Sobeys itself has over 131,000 employees in the country, or over 31 times the population of Stellarton. Number 9, Nova Scotia had lots of gold. Now, there were 3 gold rushes in Nova Scotia, one in 1860, one in 1896, and another in 1932. The first was in Mooseland, where gold was found in a boulder. Over the next number of years, gold was found all over the place, including the ovens in Lunenburg. These were natural caves that held gold. Once they were discovered, the caves were blasted out even more. Gold was even discovered in the sand on that beach there. The sand was then packed up for processing. That beach still has no sand to this day. Over 1 million ounces of gold have been produced in Nova Scotia since 1861, which would be worth over $2.5 billion today. Number 10, the co-founder of Tim Hortons created his own golf resort with a private airstrip and marina in Nova Scotia. In 2000, Ron Joyce, the billionaire co-founder of Tim Hortons, opened up the 1,100-acre Fox Harbor Golf Resort and Spa near his hometown of Tatamagouche. Tiger Woods set the course record there in 2009. It's unclear if the resort was ever actually profitable or meant to be profitable, with Ron subsidizing the operations by up to $10 million a year. But it was just a dream that he wanted to bring to his hometown. Can you think of another golf resort in Canada with its own airstrip? I can't. Anyways, if you found Nova Scotia so interesting that you want to move here and buy a house, feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the description. Goodbye.